All right, so there are three poets tonight, and I ordinarily don't talk anything about biographies, but before I give you my introduction to each of them, and I'll do it before each one of them reads, I just want to say, so Ann Taylor, Dianne Silvestri, and Dennis Daly. Ann Taylor has studied with me for many years, since like 2008 or something like that. Somebody once said to a peer in the workshop, who had been taking also a long time, they said, "Don't you ever graduate from Tom's workshop?" Dianne also worked with me for a while, and that was a great privilege. And Dennis Daly is one of the leading lights of a group called Bagels with the Bards, which meets every Saturday in Somerville now. And he is also one of the greatest reviewers. In addition to being a wonderful poet, he's one of the greatest reviewers of all time. He's just, you'd be very fortunate to have your book reviewed by Dennis Daly. Anyway, so we have three poets, and we're going in reverse order alphabetically. The people at the bottom end of the alphabet always get short shrift. So first up is Ann Taylor, then Dianne Silvestri, and then Dennis Daly. So I'll read each one and then sit down and then introduce the next one. So Ann Taylor, quote, "How much space must I allow for so much life?" asks the speaker of Ann Taylor's poem, Homestead Clearance. Although the speaker here is concerned with the legacy of things, either treasure or junk left behind in her parents' house after their deaths, the question might be measured as the poet wondering over how to decide what to memorialize of a full existence in her poetry. In the poems of her book, Looking After, the choices made indicate that the life of the speaker and her family is a very rich repository to sort through. From the mother's, quote, collection of Infant of Prague robes. Everybody here know what the Infant of Prague is? I'll tell you a story about it someday. Anyway, the Infant of Prague robes, to the father's, quote, rocks, rods, and tackle, and, quote, 10-pin trophies, unquote, to her own early apartment with its, quote, futon, lobster trap table. Now that is stylish. Chianti basket candle holders, even more stylish, of a certain era anyway. Nighthawks, that's the Edward Hopper painting, in the kitchenette. The message is that the assorted trappings of a life cannot a home make. Yet they remind with an exquisite poignancy of what a home can be. At every step of the way, the poet's acute vision and trenchant memory bank summon a world, or rather worlds, which intersect and penetrate each other's complexities. We go from intimate to almost infinite as we survey this catalog. The speaker and her husband decided to create a family with 2 adopted children, and their son is remembered for his, quote, unique self, hoisting a stuffed bear into a bucket, unquote. And then the history of the region in which the speaker raised her family is not ignored. A kettle hole, an Abenaki campsite, an Initu, then Horn Pond, a country excursion for flounced, feathered, but too often unfit canoeists, a killer pond.
Need glasses, however. The book is called Looking After. And it has actually more than a double meaning, but one is looking after in the sense of taking care or being cared for. And the other is looking worth attention to. The first poem, Homestead Clearance. My mother was best at it, preferring blonde veneer and her own decor, launching old tables, bed frames, wooden skis out the attic window into a dump truck backed beneath. I saw the china cabinet with one cracked pane go, but even she held back, leaving in the attic her father's barbershop, scissors, razors, bristleless brushes, Her mother's cut glass, red and white. One brother's bent tennis racket. The other's business school texts and ice skates. Also, her sister's backup sewing machine, swatches of leftover fabric, and her own collection of Infant of Prague robes. In her studio, she left her ceramic molds, paints, gilding, figurines with napkin skirts, and my father's rocks, rods, and tackle. Since my grandfather's 1890 move-in, layers of lives settled here. What do I do now with my father's 10-pin trophies, my mother's hand-painted ceramic reindeer with the blinking red nose? How much space must they allow for so much life? Okay. This one is about the repeated trips my family took across the country. My father loved to drive. He did all the driving across the country, and much of it down Route 66. And this is called America's Main Street. On 300-mile car days for water, the water in our portable window AC heater then was hotter than the summer blaze. My sister and I whining for a pool, any small oval dug in the rough before a rustic motor court, screen doors slamming in the wind, outhouses at the rear. Our always new pastel and white striped DeSoto, yearly cruising Route 66, ruler flat horizons, infinite cornfields, thorny vistas, triptych detours, Burma shaves, plywood jackrabbits, trading post temptations, like the baby rattlers, knotty pine everything. Soaring over it all, the flying horsepower of the mobile gas red Pegasus. Those rattlers, a dusty scattering of plastic baby rattles in a cage, casting doubt on our genuine arrowheads carved by the braves themselves, and on our authentic fossils and gold nuggets. My mother saving for, planning those neon-lit car hops, stalactite, TP weeks, and my father, the only driver, delivering us to all of it. Oh, to cruise once more with them, this singular street, to thank them for that road-wise, wide-range awakening. Okay, this poem is about being looked after. It's called Looking After. The white-haired custodian helps me with hauling my hi-fi to my second-floor apartment, a studio with one door and a window too high for jumping. At the second landing, he gestures me to the window. Come take a look, down there. On a cement slab, a man in powder blue sweater lies face down, arms spread into wings, legs buckled backwards. The cops think he jumped from up there. I step back. Nothing to be afraid of, only a dead body. I've just traded my unlocked family house for a dim hallway of numbered doors, chain bolt rattles, and my futon, lobster trap table, Chianti basket candle holders, night hots in the kitchenette fail to make here a home. Then Sven delivers from his stash in the basement 4 glass blocks to hold up my door desk. I thought they'd work, and switches on my gooseneck lamp. Knowing he and his wife dwell just beneath me, among pressed cottage curtains, cream cakes, and hummels, I brave the rickety back staircase from my car, sleep better. All summer, he places orange cones in my space behind the building, shoos away Red Sox fans. They'll park in your living room if you don't lock your door. And without a word, sweeps bottle glass from his immaculate front steps, trashed by my out-of-hand student party the night before. Later that night, he taps on my door, jingles the keys left outside in my lock. Thought you might need these. I still see him standing there, jingling the keys. This poem is about adoption entirely from my point of view. I'm well aware of how complicated the whole experience it is for anyone involved with it. This is my experience with it. It's called Are They Yours? Wrong mother, says my son's second grade classmate, alarmed and kidnapping him. No, his skin tones and my Irish pale don't match. But since days after his birth, I've been the right mother. One hand to her heart, the other patting my daughter's head, the Florentine nonna announces, "Hai un cuore grande." Were my Italian better, I would offer my set response to this undeserved praise. No, it's my gratitude, not my big heart. Are they brother and sister? Asked the mother of the 5 screamers in the circus ticket line. They are now, my usual dodge from their nosy question. Mom goes on, do they know their parents? Hoping to share the delights of adoption, I bring both kids to the agency's gathering for potential parents, where the director focuses on my son, grooming his plastic front loader across the living room. She points, this one is typical. I flinch. No, not typical, not a sample kid, but his unique self, hoisting the stuffed bear into a bucket. As we exit that show and tell, one possible parent declares, oh my God, I hope they realize how lucky they are. It's true. This is a poem about a course I took at the Arlington Evening Division. After I retired, I wanted to keep the brain functioning, so I took a course in astronomy. Right. It's called Intro to Astronomy. Orion reliably hunting the winter sky, Pegasus galloping, Leo launched into the heavens by Hercules, once familiar asterisms, consoling tales, but their shapes, alas, still shifting. The astrophysicist, the whirling simulations, Morgan Freeman's YouTube space tour, all saying that 13.5 billion years ago, a pinpoint of pressure, big banged matter, energy, space, time into being. All of us, therefore, stardust. A trip around the world, no trip at all. Our sun equaling 1 million Earths. 400 billion years just in our Milky Way, among trillions of galaxies, counting dizzying septillions of stars. Supernovas, white dwarfs, quasars exploding, black holes spaghettifying us, should we near the void where light can't shine. Leaving my night class, an ever keener pinpoint of pressure in my brain, trying to remember where on earth I parked my car. I want to make sure I'm watching time here. Are we about?
You started at
Really?
7:09, so you have 20 minutes.
Okay. I can't handle the math right now. Okay.
7:29.
Okay. Inside the Trojan horse. Comes from teaching the Iliad for years. And I was imagining what it must have been like inside the horse. Inside the Trojan horse. Odysseus's elite, we 30, crammed full-armed into a huge horse womb, wobbly on wooden wheels, a stray whisper sure to betray us. Rough respite after a decade of storming, laddering impossible walls, cascading back to our blood-drenched tents. We fear to hear, close between the planks, Laocoon's wise distrust of our oversized battle gift. But then, suddenly, no more from him. Stench mixing with wood scent suffocation, we shiver, try to settle, as our spirits sink. Odysseus wags his sword side to side into a no, glares us into bracing our spines. We freeze when Cassandra names our deceit straight on. The horse, the plot, the death. Nonsense, they determine. We exhale. Ache for an exit, wait for this beast to be trundled through the gate, eager, no matter the cost, to free ourselves from this splintery nightmare. Okay, I think I might skip that. I'll read this one. This one is a result of when I was in graduate school at BU. I would have my graduate classes in English, during the day, and then at night we would go down Comm Ave to Hillbilly Ranch in Park Square. So I was living kind of a double life. The quotations in the poem are from poems or from songs that we heard at the Hillbilly. And it's called The Same Still Sad Music. English major seminar rooms, Whale Road, Kennings, done for the day. I escape down Comm Ave to Honky Tonk Hillbilly Ranch. I leave Milton's devils, cursing with hellfire to waste his whole creation. Then pray with the Lilly brothers to drop kick me Jesus through the goalposts of life. Keats's Fade Far Away, Sad Nightingale prepares me for Hank Williams's grief, also shared by a bird. Did you ever hear a robin weep when leaves begin to die? Charlie Waller's death wish to come back as a song yearns, like Emily, for lasting consolation. 'Tis sweet to know what stalks will stand when we with daisies die. And two, Ozymandias' half-sunk, shattered visage in the desert foreshadows John Lincoln Wright's Hillbilly Elegy. The rancher's neon lit signs gone to rubble, broken windows black and blank, when the wrecking ball blew it all away. The same message. This is a poem that was published in a journal, a baseball journal called Spitball. It's called The Bases Are Filled with Orioles. Announces the color commentator this April afternoon. A pretty picture, all orange, black, and lively, the greensward rolling to the wall. But not the view of the spoiler in Red Sox, whose sole aim is to muddy those birds up, clip their wings, force them back fast to their dim digs, tarred with sunflower shells, chew, and spit. Today he freezes their flight to home, throws them all out. His next mission, to chill the red-hot Blue Jays winging from Toronto. And now I have to decide. I think I'll read a couple of other poems. You doing on time?
7 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'll read one. This is about, this poem comes from the experience. Roger and I were walking on a farm in New Hampshire between a path between two vernal pools. And we heard the frogs talking back and forth to one another. They were very loud and seeming to have a wonderful time. And that got me thinking about the Frog Prince story. You know, if the frog kisses the princess, the frog will come back to being princely again. So I thought about these frogs seem so happy. It got me thinking about it the other way. And it's called The Prince Frog. When the spiteful fairy cursed me, the last thing I foresaw was bliss. But I've come to love the oozy slime between my toes, the slip and slop of heaving myself to the next pad. It's all luscious, a green easy to get into, not those gleaming greaves, breastplates clanking, always rusting, princely stuff. Here I breathe deep, suck in rich muck scent of swamp rot, and gurgle with my mates among white lilies. From underneath, I spy with telescope eyes. Oh no, here comes the fumble thumb princess, always losing her golden ball. A faint whisper tells me to beg a kiss, just one, it always says. Why would I do that? My perfect match is here, plump, lubricious, responsive to my croaks, herself full-lipped and well along in spawning. The princess can fetch herself another retriever, a willing kisser, leave me with my ever after. I was so happy for that frog. This is a poem from, I almost finished with a collection of poems about Horn Pond in Woburn, a pond near where I grew up. I live there now again. And I'm writing many different kinds of poems about that experience. And this is one of the early poems from that set. It's called The Way I See It. He chose the hill house with the pond view for raising 4 kids. He walked there, fished there, skated figure 8 so well there. He made the local newspaper, my grandfather's pond. Not always so, a kettle hole, an Abenaki campsite on Innitu, then Horn Pond, a country excursion for flounced, feathered, and too often unfit canoeists, a killer pond, residents warned. An iced up pond where cutters with horses carved out crystal blocks of Yankee coolness for faraway exotic drinks. A job my uncles escaped from in their Model T. A child's view from my bedroom window, a site for hiking, swimming, skating, but too my mother's doom of death by drowning, a terror to keep me safe. Geese quick landing and departing this gray day bring to mind my own brief passage through my pond for a time. And then I go on from there and try to write about it. And it spoke to me, right?
You have 3 minutes.
Oh, well, okay, well, I'll read this one, I'll read one other one. This one is a recent one, actually, about my 2-year-old grandson. It's called On Track, Age 2. Juice, cookie, dump truck, mac and cheese, bluey. I want whatever fills in the blank. His daily new words, helicopter, pumpkinhead. His subject-verb sentences. The dragon wants the train station. His crisscrossing hands through airspace before him, clearing the deck of what he doesn't want. No basketball when I tune in the Celtics. No news to BBC. Preferred Lego choo-choo videos with runaway trains. Oh no, engineers snoring at the wheel, trainmen hand pumping, frantic, escaping bad boy locomotives, always making it. Hooray. I've seen too many of these videos. Some of you probably know them well. And him racing his own track over bridges, through tunnels, adapting to the switchbacks, avoiding tricky branch lines. ETA unknown. And I'll read one poem from the end here. Not that one. This one is called Autumn, my last year teaching down. I retired after 1,000 years of teaching in the year 2022. And I wrote this poem around that, after that. It's called Autumn, my last year of teaching done. Again this year, I watch ash leaves fray first, withdraw from the left. From the right, maples, wind-thinned, pull aside like curtains. Open the familiar vista from pines to Causeway Bridge, from ice house to landing to mountain. After months of leaf-muffled noise, Canada geese reliably call out clear, paddle sun-rippled water, countable. A squirrel stalks with fallen leaves, the dray swaying among high limbs, while crows mob the redtail, no longer hidden deep in shadow. Nothing at all new, the difference all in me. And then another retirement poem called Goose Passing. Watering my draggled by drought flights, I hear above my head the September honking. Expect a leader in the lead, advancing. The V vanguard to the landing, but not today. This one with no one behind or beside, wings on, disengaged but persistent, still feeling the urge to guide others through autumn's resistant air. And I'll end at that.
Thank you for that fine reading, Anne. I forgot, when you work with somebody in a workshop, you don't always appreciate all the many nuances of the poetry. And I certainly have paid plenty of attention to Anne's sense of humor, but there's something about hearing all her poems at once that you realize what a great comedian she is.
Thank you.
I also want to appreciate the way that the segue that you made between taking the class on astronomy with all the Roman gods and Greek gods and goddesses in the sky, and then right after that, you read the poem about the Iliad. So I was like, wait a minute, are we still in the same poem? Anyway, I thought that was wonderful. I forgot to welcome the online audience. I don't know how many people are there, but thank you for tuning in, to you folks at home. Okay, so up next in our alphabetical order is Dianne Silvestri. In an apt and chilling manifestation of that tendency of poets to anthropomorphize, which means to turn something that isn't human into a human, the speaker of Dianne Silvestri's poem, The Night Phlebotomist, announces, quote, "The corridors seethe with nocturnal predators." I think anybody who's ever had to spend the night in a hospital knows exactly what that feels like. The experience of the patient subjected to various tortures, which are considered part of healing, is gruesomely recalled in vivid tropes. The phlebotomist, quote, "plunges her spike," unquote, and, quote, "wrenches my arm like a lamb shank," unquote. Here, Silvestri's poetry does that work of summoning both glory and horror that poetry does possibly better than any other genre. It's a bit of a, so that I don't know about poetry being better than any other genre, but it does it well anyway. The beleaguered patient, quote, "squeaking by in the 10% sliver of possible survivors," unquote. What an arresting combination, quote, "squeaking by," unquote, and, quote, "sliver," unquote, make in the context of these grim percentages. Both a near miss and a triumph being evoked in this simply achieved minute. Had the speaker not survived, we might call Silvestri's description of an overzealous laxative dispenser gallows humor. She wears, quote, "mascara so thick I'm sure she can't see me," unquote. Instead, it comes across as a witty condescension, a hyperbole concerning her tormentor, uttered by someone who has been subjected to more hyperbole in her treatment than would seem bearable. And finally, in an expertly conceived progression, wanting, which seems hardly worth it to the harried patient, becomes something urgently wished for. The parade starts with, quote, "it is impossible not to want," unquote, coils back on itself, quote, "making futile almost any wanting," unquote, breaks out of the pessimism and confirms against the odds the persistence of the life force, quote, "now it is harder not to want," and resolves into an emphatic existence affirming declaration, quote, "so I'm definitely wanting now." Dianne Silvestri.
Okay, we'll try this. Good. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, James, around the corner. Thank all of you who have come, and those virtually here. Really, really means a lot. So I'm going to read from the book that's available over there, Without the Fringe. I wrote these poems when I was trying hard to find out what was left after the trauma of learning that I had acute myeloid leukemia. One blood test after what turned out to be my final day seeing patients in clinic. So most of the poems deal with my identity or disorientation. My life was upended, and I'm going to begin the book tonight with the poem Cosmic questions. I learned of a man in a Bosnian town who, rather than rant and curse, purchased steel plates for his roof after scientists verified the 6th meteor strike in 3 years. Experts cannot explain this homing of galactic trash to a tiny terrestrial target, nor do they understand why one of my white blood cells turned killer. And then we have one of the earlier experiences, but perpetual after that, of the night phlebotomist. The corridors seethe with nocturnal predators, their voices low. My door latch coughs. A figure hisses, "I've come to draw blood," wrenches my arm like a lamb shank, rasps it with alcohol, plunges her spike, pops one color-coded rubber stoppered tube after another into the sheath, and then unplugs each loaded one to add to the crimson log pile weighting my thigh. Steals more, it seems, than ought to be ample from this provisional liquor of my life. So as you've gathered, I was a doctor before that fateful night, and this was an upended life now that I had been admitted to. This poem is doctor as patient. In medical school, we all imagined catching infirmities as we learned them. Addison's myxedema, every headache, a brain tumor. I'm now awkwardly beached, my white coat surrendered, modesty breached by the gaping leak of the extra large blue gown as students file in. I agree to be their mannequin. Let them interview me, smile and survey, palpate, percuss, and auscultate me, because I recall my young stethoscope on early test runs. Now, ripped from my role as teaching physician, I body double as teaching case, naked in a snow globe. The room for that month was lonely, but I made a friend. This poem is Poem for George. I've named this special IV pole George, my constant companion in empty hours through chemo and the eternal waiting. He tirelessly suspends fluid balloons and supports pumps that purr and sizzle like dizzy bees, pushing mysteries into me. George is strong to stay my step and sometimes winks his gleam at my gloom. He doesn't object if I push him away when I need some space. Infrequently, his tires accidentally roll over the 3 trailing tubes that hitch us together. He tries to fit his 6-wheeled stance beside the toilet in my narrow bathroom. He's become a friend, even if twice he nipped my ankle. But I understand. My anger slips out sometimes, too. The next poem is A Bag of Blood. In med school, I reclined once every 3 months on blood bank vinyl as a rocking plastic canister tick-tocked, tapping a warm river that coursed from my open arm. A stress-free deed I exchanged for a stipend of $25 back then to ease my austere living. Not once making the visit graphic, as if possibly paying it forward. So I managed to be put into a remission from my AML by the chemo, and then lived through barely the consolidation treatment, which was a lower dose, but had very few cells still, and was told by my oncologist that it was unlikely that I would sustain the remission. I'd have a relapse, and next time around chemo probably wouldn't work so well, if at all. I needed to have a bone marrow transplant, or what's now called a stem cell transplant. And so the search was on for a match, and a perfect match was found. I was only told he's a healthy 28-year-old man. Dear healthy 28-year-old man, how did you get the idea to be a marrow donor? What prompted you to sign to let them swab your cheek? Why did you take a chance somewhere there might be a me? How did you feel when they called to warn you could be a match? Did they ask you if you still wanted to do it? Still wanted to give your cells? And how did you react when your blood confirmed your chromosome 4 immunity was a perfect totem of mine? 10 stripes in perfect match. Did you know about the shots that would drive your bones to ache to make newborn cells to be siphoned, sifted, and shipped on ice to me, longing, readied, and waiting? Whoever you are, will your sacrifice be worthwhile? And that was another month after I barely survived the infusion. Got an infection and all that, almost was in the ICU. So a month of waiting for those cells to begin to work to replace my own. A very unusual situation to ponder, and I did. The next poem is Chimera. An epigraph for the poem comes from the dictionary. Chimera, noun, 1, an organism with tissues of diverse genetic composition. 2, a fanciful or nearly impossible idea. There's a man in my life, nesting in caverns in my bones, pulsing his excursions and navigating forks in my veins, almost as if he owns them. The blood in there I call mine, but its cells wear his signature. I pray this union will work, but worry about a mutiny. I must find a way to persuade the new guy to be my ally. God help the two of me to get along. One antibiotic gave me the side effect of a torn tendon. And that brought some memories from me. I remembered me back then. This is drug-induced tendon tear. In 8th grade art class, we sat at long tables, slathering sloppy strips of torn paper over an old light bulb to mold a puppet head. Mine stared from beneath heavy brows, smiled fat sausage lips like a crazed uncle. A horseshoe of glued yarn skirted his bald pate. Today in the cast room, I ponder my puppet's earlier persona, ones buried as I mashed each layer over the last to change the chin, regroove the forehead, resculpt the nose and cheeks, reshape his lips to be broader, choose the width of his gaze. The head scarred hard in drying, earlier visages covered, just like former me, smothered, gone. the days and weeks in the hospital were long, I wrote this poem to my husband. Advance directive. If I don't come home from the light blue walls of this place, it's not that I want to abandon you to do everything alone. But don't forget to replace my voice with yours at home on the answering machine. Please take the gourmet cooking class you always said you wanted. And if you resume dance lessons, pretend it is I waltzing with you. I did get out sometimes, and on one discharge, I made this little trip, choosing the right pumpkin farm stand, Natick, Massachusetts. You there. You are the one. You moon face like those of us who've been taking too much prednisone for too long. Nubby scar across your forehead, dried abrasion, stubbling your chin. You are the wounded, strong soul. I will give you eyes to find me likewise. And then I was readmitted again. It was back and forth. But this time readmitted to the overflow ward, which, by the way, didn't have all my nurse friends, you know, a lot of friends by then. And there is an epigraph by Franz Kafka from the trial. It is not necessary to accept everything as true. One must only accept it as necessary. Just as I'm aching for a warm blanket, the new nurse coasts into my room. Mascara so thick, I'm sure she can't see me. She doesn't even seem to know my name, but holds out a loaded cup of brown pills. I don't need a laxative. Oh, you should take them, she strikes in the voice of a dressing room attendant. We give them to everyone here twice a day. It's like a warm blanket. Is there anything else you need? Direct quote. And so the next poem comes after an admission. You may resume your normal activities as tolerated, they tell me on discharge. But it's hard to re-engage. Quit the cage. Go on stage. Own my rage. I must hide these mulberry stains, this shareable translucent skin, tissue thin, plum cushion, battered twin. My inner space, flash fry or cry mode. But worst, my replaced face, unknown phase, fallout trace, sheer disgrace. From cortisone blown wide to a visage I don't recognize, rude disguise, unsought prize. Close your eyes. A two-eyed, full bulging bowl of yeast risen sheep dough, snow buffalo, scarecrow, freak show. I howl at this moon. What about you, abductee, addressee, used to be me? But I was out again with a little bit of improvement and got to make a trip to Montreal with my husband, who was going there for a meeting. This epigraph for this poem comes from my hospital chart. The patient is at high risk of morbidity from medications as well as her disease. The title of the poem is With Feathers. In Montreal with my husband, I stroll Rue St. Catherine, startled as a sidewalk sweeper flopping his hinged dustpan hops the curb, while the still body of a white pigeon lies beak against the store's wall. Birds that bullet my kitchen windows may ricochet injured, but usually snap up and ruffle, shrug off the stun and fly, alive, maybe one feather missing. I trouble over the on-duty doctor's words in his note about me. Morbidity sounds like mortality. The crimson M drags my neck when I'm trying so hard to fly. And as things got better, this was one of my victories. Retail therapy. Declared fit to shop for groceries, I heat my carriage with bulging bags, offload bounty to my car, coax my empty cart on the asphalt to surge toward the highlight of the trip. At the return stall, I plunge the cart into the queue in clattering collision, thrust it through the nearest basket's back, then ram the two to engage some strays, grating cacophony while I assemble those flung pell-mell by odd customers who don't appreciate how good this feels. And I'm going to finish with a poem that became kind of for me a metaphor of the whole experience, which actually is now more than 11 years ago that this all started. Rose quartz geode I found in the woods. It might crack open that drab, warty stone if I smacked it hard against a boulder. Might split to disclose a fist-sized cave of sparkling crystals, flashing beauty I only later learned was wrought by sore time and moisture seeping to mingle minerals in hidden space, to squash a stack of what siphoned through cracks, to become a scintillating marvel of creation, like the ultimate reward of torment and waiting. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So there is a somewhat overused word in poetry criticism, which is lapidary. And lapidary implies something that's been highly polished, as a jeweler might polish a stone. And I think your reading tonight was lapidary. Lapidary in the sense that every phrase was given a kind of heft of its own. And you pulled all of those things together with such marvelous concentration and attention. I felt like I was listening to a screenplay in verse. It was just so terrific. Thank you. Thank you. And those of you who studied with me know that I am always looking for an epitaph for myself. And I occasionally borrow that from people's poems. So one of the best ones I've ever heard was the image of putting the strips on the light bulb. This would be my epitaph. He was a crazed uncle with a fat sausage lip. Perfect. Thank you.
You can have it.
All right, so last but not least is Dennis Daly. Dennis's family spells their last name different than mine. We are probably anciently cousins way back. Anyway, in the poetry of Dennis Daly, turns of phrases insinuate themselves into our imagination with zealous panache. What might one make of this comparison with the sun? Quote, like a host, an unleavened confection, held high, then zigzagging into drama, unquote. Except to think that it fuses the respect of an old faith with a bit of mischievous blasphemy. The witnesses to the apparition of the Blessed Virgin at Fatima, Portugal, are situated with rococo and winking affection as, quote, under the offbeat, consternated skies, rife with fresh secrets and innuendos, weather evaporated lullabies. Now, has there ever been a more glorious combination of Anglo-Saxon and Latinate English? In a poetry culture, academic, American, in which rhyme is often disparaged as the province of light verse and children's tales, Daly reminds us of the potency of the well-chosen rhyme. Listen carefully to these pairings. Those boys will have their day. Long dreamed the reverence and the homage. They'll come to know infernal foreplay, like buttered turnips and boiled carnage. Randy boys who, quote, have their day, unquote, bring us to the marvelous, quote, infernal foreplay, unquote. And in a stunning reversal of terms, an homage brings us to boiled carnage. And finally, the exercise of irony brings us to the comparison of a saloon and a fiery forge, both seen as a waiting room for some kind of judgment. Moving toward me, the barkeep smirks, then smiles, his all-knowing welcome. I'm early and unrepentant. The judgment is in. Dennis Daly is a poet, a wordsmith of surpassing skill.
Where can I put this? Right here. Thank you very much to the Grolier for inviting me here, and I'm honored to read with my fellow poets, and thank you all for coming.
Go, Dennis.
We'll start with a poem that means nothing and everything. Why Waltham will not do. No, Waltham will not do. Will not watch me walk on through. Will not stop and chew the fat. No, no, not even that. Waltham ticks to sleep. Gives me dreams, counts all sheep. Time's up, I'm told that too. No, Waltham will not do. This is called an ode on today's canonization of Jacinta and Francisco Mato, the Our Lady of Fatima. When brother sun detached himself and spun above the milling flock at Fatima, like a host an unleavened confection held high, then zigzagging into drama, discalous Lucia marshaled her cousins close, under the offbeat, consternated skies, rife with fresh secrets and innuendos, weather evaporated lullabies. I imagine a pope, the last pious, costume within the Vatican garden, consumed with prophetical animus, a third message, revered desolation. My mother understood. Our family prayed together before the living room sofa, moved bead after bead over a decade for peace, for the conversion of Russia. The commies blinked evolved, deconflated into auctioneers, nuclear conmen. Jacinta and Francisco, outdated, died of influenza, age 9, age 10. Apparitions erupt from innocence. Today's womb opens, it comforts, endears. Mary enters divinity's absence, miracles resolved into souvenirs. Solar rays shine through a goblet's crystal. Cerulean waters sparkle beyond joy. Pour earthward from eternity's mantle. Souls seek heaven, eyewitnesses annoy. This is an old one. This is called Dancing with My Daughters. Dancing with my daughters, dancing with my dears, pipes and drums play in their hearts, quell their evening tears, quell their evening tears. One I cradle in my arms, the other holds my knee. Our song sung round the living room, a whirling symmetry, a whirling symmetry. We bump into a table, the needle skips a beat, the record ends, a strange silence. It slows the dancer's feet, it slows the dancer's feet. Soon the music starts again, an elegy or hymn, a laugh, those tears, a smile combine to rhyme what was a whim, to rhyme what was a whim. Now sorrow fades to distance, we frolic in the four. These counterpoints of rhythm define our metaphor, define our metaphor. In jigs we step off moments, in reels we course through days. Our lifelong dance loves measurement. We cannot paraphrase, we cannot paraphrase. Dancing with my daughters, dancing with my dears, pipes and drums play in their hearts, quell their evening tears, quell their evening tears. This poem is set in Afghanistan. Kela-e is a fortress up in northern Afghanistan, and there was an awful battle there, and Americans were involved, and the first casualty of the Afghanistan war happened there. A guy by the name of Mike Spahn. It's called Kela-e. They expected me. The garrison turned out. Before I was driven in, staked out banners praised the glorious dead with words, no doubt, well meant. The commander showed his manners, offered a meal. I accepted only tea. Then the obligatory tour of the fort. The neat pile of used shells, a wall still bloody from frantic hands that could not push off or thwart or hide from the fierce and undeterred stalk of utter darkness. The craters were still there, and the roofless pink house. We stopped our walk, looked into the broken underground lair, where the final stand of insurrection was bombed and burned and flooded into shock. The survivors from this tortuous bastion staggered up bone cold, unable to talk, sense, or see a future. They were trucked away. We moved on to the American shrine, a cenotaph of sorts, a tasteful cliche. He had begun to interrogate, define his subjects when hell came looking for him, as it does in this country. I felt rage, saw him cut down by the multitude, a grim reminder that man's vengeance and outrage cannot be ignored or cowed into place. Our stern commander nodded at one ghost, and I knew he had the power to erase, to override. Then this errant shadow host smiled at me as if to plead a lost case. At that moment, I saw the fortress anew, understood the commander's eerie face, felt the dread come for me, lay siege, break through. I worked for quite a while at the General Electric Company. I was one of the heads of the union there. And my aide was an electrician. The plumbers, the electricians, the tradespeople were very close to me. And they were my close constituents. There were 9,000 union members. We were the biggest local on the East Coast. And this guy was I was brand new to this, and I rose a bit too fast, and he knew things that I didn't know. And this is called the electrician. He knew things, listened to wires buzz above us, renewed connections or broke them off. Every liquid lunch he fueled up and flamed with fervor, funneling information to me, my trusted friend, his soul spark at screwdriver contact, creating a myth costume in pads, helmeted in hard plastic to face down enmity of undetonated bile set to go off on the weight of my step. He believed in wonder, showed me the bug phones and gadget traps, his fear cords still frayed. He generated whatever I became. I'm going to read another poem from that era. One of the first jobs I accomplished when I went to GE was I was told to sweep up a room. It was filled with dust, about an inch thick on the floor. It turns out it was asbestos dust, and I had to take it and put it behind in a place which was marked skull and crossbones. And then I found out that everyone that worked at GE every day was breathing asbestos. It was all over the pipes. GE was an aging factory, and everybody was breathing it. None of us wear masks or are told why. We shovel and sweep this gray material into neat piles, then seal it in plastic. But of course, we know by its texture what it is and pin the right name on it. Manic, we joke about our final moments, sniff, collapse, stiffen. Our fantasies of death, always curious, play themselves out like children. We urge each other on to disaster. The acceptance of the dear, more accelerating when our end, though at this moment remote, becomes a common plight. Prompted by uncasual friends, will pale about this in years to come. One of my close friends, he was very important for me staying in power. He was the vice president of our union. And it turns out he was reporting to the company every day, and he was being paid. And I found out about it, and I needed him. And I actually liked the guy. But I was very careful what I said, and you just have to deal with what you're handed. Doubled your money, didn't you? Yes, you admitted it to me. I'm a whore, you said. That doesn't excuse what you did. Your betrayals, you were clever, plotted with us, a tempered representative of your fellow workers, a peace worker on paper, reporting every decision of ours to your handlers, my home under surveillance for 6 months, and you, my good friend, my erstwhile ally, I stood on pallets next to you, campaigning, laughed at your wit and your wry, disturbing ironies. I'm going to read a few pantoums. I have a book entitled Pantoums that I put out a while ago. Pantoums were originally a rowing song and quite old. This is called Sergeant's Pond on a Snowy Morning. I've had a scare just once or twice. That icy sheen can flip you back. Bowing trees freeze paradise. They genuflect to what you lack. That icy sheen can flip you back, bang you up, even steal your name. They genuflect for what you lack, these players of a winter's game. Bang you up, even steal your name, as if your name still sounded true. These players of a winter's game follow paths of dread toward rendezvous, as if your name still sounded true. Bowing trees freeze paradise, follow paths of dread toward rendezvous. I've had a scare just once or twice. Let's see. When I was a kid, I was a stutterer. This is called Tongue-Tied. Wait to say what one cannot, presumptuous of advantage, frozen in panic of forethought, abandon there appears one passage, presumptuous of advantage, of importance that never flinches, abandon there appears one passage, think not in feet but in inches, of importance that never flinches, words hesitate in their pressing, think not in feet but in inches, the answer redoubles regressing, words hesitate in their pressing, break down into dread syllables, the answer redoubles regressing, freeing the auricular muscles, break down into dread syllables, frozen in panic of forethought, freeing the auricular muscles, wait to say what one cannot. Let's see. Back into Afghanistan. This is the Mazer Hotel. It was quite a place, again, in northern Afghanistan, outside of Mazar-e-Sharif. It was a grand hotel, something like Rick's place in Casablanca. Everybody went there, and it turned out to the German military took it over at one point. Mazer Hotel. Transgressions must have brought one here into the pillared Grand Hotel, down regal stairs with chandelier, anxious halls and muted eggshell, into the pillared Grand Hotel, windows used for target practice, anxious halls in muted eggshell, all impersonate the guiltless, windows used for target practice by roaming armies in the field, all impersonate the guiltless, where killers once stood, now they kneel. By roaming armies in the field, destruction came this way and left. Where killers once stood, now they kneel, absorb the shock of human theft. Destruction came this way and left, wrecked the tunnels, blew the bridges, absorbed the shock of human theft. There are no other messages. Wrecked the tunnels, blew the bridges, left spacious tubs with broken feet. There are no other messages, only vacancy and deceit. Left spacious tubs with broken feet, down regal stairs with chandelier. Only vacancy and deceit, transgressions must have brought one here. Have that book here? It's a true story. This happened during the blizzard of '78. The pilot boat Can Do was lost with 5 souls aboard. During the New England blizzard of '78, the boat's captain and crew volunteered to go to the aid of a Coast Guard vessel, which was in trouble. which in turn had been dispatched to aid the floundering oil tanker, Global Hope, perfectly named. This is called the Can-Do in Salem Sound. Green water engulfs the boat's bow, the given grace of God gathers force into the carve of gale, the bellow from blizzard's blunt maw, a concourse of rolling ice walls, the slash of belt, knees buckle under it, rip roar blind, radar gone, geysers dropped, fates misdealt over grim gunwale, 5 men entwined, one life, one groundswell birth, rolls out to another far-off strand, ungrudged. Why, Lord, do men give all, without doubt, ride to the gun's crack, their lives judged in moments, between the awful troughs, the sinew-stretching time of valor, of saving others, nature's cast-offs, bereft of bearing shorn of anchor, foam and growl from deep nights nowhere, ocean missiles catapult away their vital windshield, spray, plunge, and fear into hard shoal waters. Mayday. Yes, why do these men give all? What divine spark, grave, buffeted gene, urges good men forward, crest, then fall, cascading down their last ravine? This is called the Grimshaw House. The Grimshaw House is a famous house in Salem. It was in disrepair. Mold was climbing up the sides of it. It's it's partially in the oldest cemetery in Salem. It was owned by the Peabody family, 3 sisters. One married Nathaniel Hawthorne, and one married Horace Mann, who began the public school system. And one, I think it was Elizabeth Peabody. She was the editor and publisher of the Dial, the Transcendentalist, and perhaps the first feminist, really. And very interesting house, very interesting people. They're repairing it now, finally. I'd like to think this had something to do with it, but maybe. Grimshaw House, fingering up, soundless through the still air. The ivy embraces the shingled skin, while spots of mildew spread their gray despair on ancient boards and pegs, and those therein, this graveyard haven, this gnawing nightmare. Inside the warmth and rage of fireplace flashes out the unleavened spirits of happier time. Above the staircase, one young girl imagines the worst, fidgets her children's future, her love's flirtatious grace, descending past paintings of dark romance to both her sisters and their pallid guests, some invited, some visiting this manse, escaping the cold of those weathered chests, this climbing LJ, their presence implants, now behind blinds blurred on the 3rd floor, a finger of separation, I'm watching, by time suspicious tenant, nothing more. Outside is not welcome, the porch debauched by rot. I dare the triple lock front door. I'm going to read one more, I think. Let's see. These are rondels. This is the Sleeping Tomb, and there's actually a famous pipe music by Gordon Duncan, who was a great piper, and called the Sleeping Tomb. And I kind of wrote this after that. The Sleeping Tomb. More than one adrift in silence, more than nowhere in breaking light. Within the sound of keen foresight, we dance for days' continuance. Tease out a soul of excellence. We see it step in soft eye bright. More than one adrift in silence. Relax the taunt, pull the distance, to praise again the good night, in which we curve a satellite that pulses with bedtime cadence, more than one adrift in silence. Thank you.
So the family that Dennis and I both are part of, the Daly family, which is an anglicization of O'Dalig, Odalaighe. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right. But they were the hereditary poets of the kings of Munster, which was a kingdom, one of the four kingdoms of Ireland. And I could hear in Dennis's cadences the old chant, the old enchantment of those bards. The word enchantment has to do with something that is brought about by chanting, which causes a mesmerizing effect, and that certainly was true. I was particularly taken with pantoums, the rhythms of those, and also the lyrical cadence of that marvelous poem about the relationship with the electrician. That was really, really wonderful. Anyway, a round of applause again for these three poets. They all have books for sale. They've all donated their books to the Grolier. The Grolier is not a profit-making institution. It relies on the sales of books to keep its doors open. So please buy one book of each of these three poets, or at least one book, before you walk out the door. Thank you, and thanks again to James.
Thank you, everybody, for coming this evening. Let's give Tom a round of applause for hosting us and giving his wonderful introduction. Give one more round of applause to the poets who read tonight. Thank you for the wonderful reading. And to reiterate what Tom said, we have some books for sale. Poets will be signing books. If everyone could please put your chairs up against one of the walls, I'd be very grateful. Thank you so much for coming.
How's Jeff doing?
That's why